Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we're going to continue a discussion we started a little while ago about the father factor and the importance of dads in parenting. My guests are Healthy Families consultant Alvean Lyons. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Good morning.
And so that there's a dad on the set getting to
We had to make it fair today.
That's right. We have the Reverend Kevin Swann. Welcome.
Glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
This is a little bit different because we want to talk about dads who are maybe not in the household anymore.
Right.
And how that complicates their ability to parent and how we can work around that.
Absolutely. And really focusing on the component that's really the adult factor. How the relationship between the mom and dad
should be the adult factor.
Should be. And it's exactly the opposite. Sometimes we find ourselves acting just like children, which is unfortunate, and our children suffer for it. Mm-hmm. But really being able to see it from a father's perspective, fathers who want to be involved in the process, but there's some dynamics that happen between the adult relationship that are adversely affecting these fathers' abilities to be actively involved in their children's lives. So today we get a chance to talk about that. And Kevin's really going to talk about it from a father's perspective and what he hears from the countless fathers he works with.
And that's what I was going to say, because it is what you hear.
Right.
Yes.
This is not from
absolutely.
personal experience, because your family is all together.
Yes.
But you certainly work with and hear from a lot of dads who are trying to stay involved, and it's hard. Why is it so hard?
Well, it's a huge issue, Robin. And first of all, single-parent homes are on the rise in every ethnic category, particularly in the African-American community. 7 out of 10 African-American children live in a single-parent home. So wow. you have this dynamic that is very much prevalent in our society. And so I hear from dads quite a bit. I'm paying child support. I want to have a vested role in my child's life. For whatever reason, I'm not having that opportunity. And there's a lot of frustrated dads, whether the mom and dad were married, whether it's a divorce situation, or whether they were not married. There still are a lot of people out there, a lot of good fathers who want to be in their child's lives and for whatever reason are not able to do so.
Okay, so what are some of those? You're dancing around the issue. No. What are some of those reasons?
Well, I think one of the biggest reasons is the relationship, as Alvean mentioned, between the father and the mother, mm-hmm. how it may have ended or how it has evolved, perhaps when they started and maybe the relationship was moving forward. Now it has taken a turn and no longer are the two together. That can cause a lot of friction and some personal feelings in terms of what access would you have now to the child. I do think financial. I do think how parents look at, how both sides look at wanting to raise the child. I think all of those factors contribute, but I do think the biggest one is the relationship between mom and dad. If it is not good, if it's not healthy, then unfortunately the child ends up suffering the most because of that unhealthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let's assume it was a bad breakup, because most breakups are.
Right.
Even if they don't start out bad, by the time you get through the end of the process,
Absolutely.
It's not pretty. How do we, as grown-ups, try to put that behind us? I mean, you see all the flaws in this person that caused the relationship to end. Right. Maybe you're even thinking that you're being protective of your children, mm-hmm. or whatever. So how do we all as grown-ups get past that on both sides?
Well, it's really not about the parent.
That's the key, right?
Completely honest with you. It's about the child.
You have to stop and put those children first.
Right, and grown-ups need to be grown-ups. Let's just be honest. Mm-hmm. And at some point you have to realize that what's really in the best interest of the child. It's not my personal feeling. I understand that we're maybe not in the same space that we were in before, but at the end of the day, we do still have a responsibility to co-parent. And we have to figure out a way to sit down. Even if we can't focus on any other topic of conversation and agree on, we need to find some common ground on how we're going to raise the child. And I think, unfortunately, that gets lost in the hurt feelings mm-hmm. and the things that have gone on in the personal relationship. You can never get to the place of trying to figure out how it's going to work.
Struggles over money and using
Absolutely.
That visitation potentially as a tool or a threat or mm-hmm. whatever.
Absolutely.
It can be pretty rough.
And one of the things that you sometimes see, because I work with the moms, so we get both ends of the spectrum. So when I'm talking to the moms, one of the things I hear is that while I'm moving on to my new relationship, my new partner is not really thrilled about the old partner being too involved in the process. So many of these women are actually pushing some of these dads out in order to create a new nuclear family, or what feels like one, which really is tough for the child, because I want to be happy for you, Mom, that you found a new partner. That's great. But I have a dad, and I actually want to have a relationship with my dad. But if there's a problem between the adult partners in being able to accept these other entities who are involved, moms, dads, whoever it may be, that tends to take precedence over the child's need to have a relationship with the parent. So it's a little bit ugly for the kids, because they're almost taught to keep their mouth shut about how they feel in order to sacrifice their own feelings for the benefit of the adult relationships. And I feel for them. I mean, it's really dramatic for children. And then feeling like it's disloyal on some level to your mom or your dad to be able to, take sides or desire something that the parent who's taking care of you does not want. So it really adds some real complexities, but it's hard for the parent that's on the outside to figure out where they fit anymore. And then that's when things start to get a little, and I don't mean volatile in a physical way, I'm talking about verbally volatile. The power struggles start to happen, because I want to have a relationship with my child and I have the right to. But now that I have to force it, that's when the legal aspects begin, and now we're trying to point out all the reasons why you shouldn't be in the child's life and I shouldn't. And the child, it's just a tug of war, and the kids suffer. So as Kevin referenced, that we have to be grown-ups where this is concerned. We made a child together. It was not the child's decision to come here. We have to figure out how to move past what we think about each other and our pursuits of our own new relationships to remember that the kid is the priority, and he or she is not in a position to do battle with adults over things that have absolutely nothing to do with them.
So how do we keep the kids out of the middle? I mean, really, it's very hard, especially if you have maybe one parent who's trying to do it and one parent who's not trying so hard.
Right.
I mean, how do you advise people? How do you work through those things?
You have to be clear in boundaries and clear in expectations. And I think this is true with any relationship, but especially when you have two parents who are not in the same relationship. If I could just go back to a moment to Alvean's point about moving on. So a lot of people do move on, but the child is still left with this new person coming in. Can I really trust that this new person is going to be in the picture long term?
Right.
Because we don't even know if this is going to be a long-term relationship. But now you're asking me to let my guard down, to be emotionally there for this particular person, and I don't even have any idea of the length or the type of relationship this is. So that's a challenge. So I think what needs to happen is, again, going back to mom and dad, what are going to be some of the consistencies and boundaries that we can establish, that we can all agree to, so that we can build a level of trust going forward. If you say you're going to be here at 9 p.m., you need to be here at 9 p.m. for the sake of your child, because you don't want to let your child down and have your child's hopes up. I'm waiting on mom, I'm waiting on dad, and then dad's not there at that particular time. So there really needs to be clear boundaries established by the parents, and then letting the child know what those boundaries are. And also letting the child know that in spite of mommy and daddy not being together, that child is still very much loved and appreciated, and mommy and daddy still care for them a great deal. Because I think, as you know, children who are in divorce situations, they do carry a lot more emotional weight. They do take on some personal responsibility, whether it's their issues or not. And they need to know it's not their fault, but they need to know what's going to be working, what's the process. And oftentimes, parents don't sit down and tell their children how we're going to move forward. What can you expect? What are the guidelines? And so it leaves kids hanging, trying to figure it out.
Really good point about both of you, hopefully together, being able to talk to the kids so that everybody's on the same table. But if not, at least both of you talking to the kids. Because I think when kids are left out, they imagine the worst.
Absolutely.
You totally think that, everything's your fault and it's going to fall apart, and you don't know if you're going to be safe in the world and what's going to happen. And it's a scary thing. So
then when you can't agree to do that, now you have to bring a judge in. To tell you how this relationship is going to be. And the child doesn't know anything about a judge. All the child wants to know is that I have an access and I'm important to both my mother and my father. And if my mother and father can't get along, then how can I still be important in both of their lives?
And am I going to have to choose? And
Absolutely.
then a kid gets a little older and begins to exploit that.
Yes.
They
Absolutely.
figure
Yes.
out what they can get away with and how they can play the parents against each other.
Yes.
And you really don't want that to happen.
Absolutely, and we don't even realize that we're creating that atmosphere. Because while we are just trying to win, our kids are figuring out that this is, even though it's not emotionally a healthy situation at all, they start to relate to it as a game almost.
What
So
can I get
what
out
can I
of
get out of
this?
this? How can I pit them against each other? You're going home to one parent and you're saying that the other parent won't do this or does that. Now, if this parent is trying to garner new favor with you, oh, I'll buy it for you instead. Oh, your father could have afforded to, but he didn't want to. Now then it's, oh, your mother's always trying to find reasons not to do things for you. I've got it covered. And the kids are just manipulating the situation because they're playing
because we're
on
manipulating the
exactly.
situation.
Right.
That's exactly
We're
right.
teaching them how.
How
Right.
to relate to this.
And why is that the case? Because you're operating by two different sets of rules.
Absolutely.
Right? So the one set is for the person who has primary custody that they're trying to, and then they feel like when they go off on the weekend, they don't abide by the same set of rules. So now they have to reprogram them by the time they get back home. And again, it goes back to what sets of rules can we agree to on both sides so that there is consistency and stability no matter where the child is going.
And if you're the parent with primary custody, it's kind of nice to have those breaks. It is nice to
Absolutely.
rely on somebody else. It is very, very hard to do this 24/7
Absolutely.
by yourself. So figure out how to make it work for you as opposed to resenting it. Geez, my mom had Sundays off. I was with my dad on Sundays. My brother and I were with my dad, and I feel certain she needed that break.
Absolutely.
And it worked for us because Dad didn't have to worry about us all the time. So Sundays were really special. You know,
Yes.
we went to the zoo, we went to the park, we had picnics. It wasn't necessarily expensive, but it was special time. But then, I think as both of them got remarried, there were a whole lot more complications. So it isn't just can we as exes figure out how to do this. It's
Right.
how do we incorporate the new kids and not make the kids feel threatened, or the step kids and, my kids against your kids. It's a minefield out there.
It is. And again, I say consistency and communication. And the one thing I would also add, if the two parents are getting along, never should they ever talk bad about
Absolutely.
the other person to the child.
Which also includes screaming on the phone when the kids can hear it, I might
Right.
say.
Yes.
You might
Right.
say, well, I didn't say it to my child.
But I let them overhear
I
it.
did.
Yes.
Intentionally a lot of times.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
Not good for the kids.
The children should they're going to figure it out anyway.
Sure.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be that the parent is going to say, well, you're just like your father, or, you're going to be this or be that, because that's already putting an impression in the child's mind that the relationship is already not working. So now I may figure that I'm a byproduct of this, and it's
And
not.
my relationships won't work either. And it's not
Exactly.
my fault. I don't have to
Exactly.
try because you said I'm just like dad or mom or whatever.
Absolutely.
And it's so dysfunctional in doing that kind of stuff. And we forget, especially when our kids are younger. When they're older, they're processing in different kinds of ways. So it still has negative impact, but how they process it when it's older is a little bit different because they take that in different ways and they apply it in different ways. But when they're younger, you don't realize what it is that you're actually saying to your kids. Because when you're talking about your father's a bum, he's a deadbeat dad, he's this, that, and the other because you're angry, you are saying to this child that half of me really stinks. Because I know that I didn't get here just because of you, perfect mom. Because as you're presenting that you're oh so perfect in all of this and you're doing all the right things and dad's doing all the wrong things, you might be 100% perfect in your world, but what you don't realize, in my little 5-year-old world, I'm only half good because the other half of me that made me was him. So when you're talking about him, you're telling me that most of me or a significant portion of me is not good. And what's worse is if you feel that way about him, then do you feel that way about half of me too? And kids don't have the language to talk about it, but we don't realize how much of an impact it has and how they define themselves. So you're absolutely right in terms of the being careful with the kids over here. It's not always just what we say directly, but even what they hear indirectly, they're processing, and they don't have the capability or the maturity to be able to make sense of all that, to say, that's between mom and dad, and that's not about me. It instantly becomes about the kids. So if nothing else, at least shield them from that. You don't have to lie and say that he's wonderful if he's not, or that she's great if she's not, but you also don't have to say. Sometimes when dads are falling down on their job, sometimes your kids need to hear you say that your dad loves you. He's just working through some things right now, and unfortunately, some of those things are causing us to not be able to spend time together, but he knows that you're great and you're the best thing that ever happened between us. You're the one thing we got 100% right. And just leave it there. Yes, dad is doing what he's doing. Yes, you're going through what you're going through or feeling how you're feeling, but you owe it to your kids to leave them whole even if you feel broken.
And that's hard. And if we do slip up, because we all slip up, none of us is perfect at this.
Of course. And it's emotional, so it's hard to be.
To the kids, I'm sorry, I'm angry with your dad. Sometimes, I get really upset, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't love him. It doesn't mean that I didn't love him once upon a time. It just means I'm mad, and we're going to work through this, and it's not about you. Because kids imagine that it is if they don't.
That's absolutely true.
And if I could say something to the fathers in this moment, right? Because in most cases, mothers get primary custody. And I think sometimes dads feel like, if I'm paying child support and you have custody, then you have the advantage, so to speak. That is no excuse for a dad still not to be involved in their child's life because they're not staying with them throughout the week on a consistent basis. Dad, you still need to show up to PTA meetings. Dad, you still need to know who the teachers are. Dad, you still need to go to the games. Dad, you still need to be present and involved. Dad, you still need to have dialogue to the extent you can with your child as often as you can. And even though we might not be staying in the same places, that does not give me the right to completely back away and leave it up to mom to try to figure everything out. There is a responsibility for dads. And when dads go into the schools, it sends a message. When dads show up to the games, it sends a message. This has nothing to do with how I get along with mom. This is my responsibility because I want to be a father in every way to my child. And sometimes I think dads take a complete step back, and that can be detrimental to the child's well-being too.
I think that's hard too. And I think dads have to kind of push their way in a little bit. Because if some of us are putting up roadblocks, wherever that's coming from, they've got to keep going. And maybe it means you have a separate parent-teacher conference. You don't necessarily have to
have one
be in
together.
the same room if that doesn't work out. But you still have the right to be involved, and it's good for the kid to be involved. So if the two of you can't be in the same room, have separate conferences. Go to the game, sit at different places, or the school play, or the band concert, or whatever it is.
And the other thing, too, to Kevin's point, is one of the mistakes that happens with men sometimes, because malehood, masculinity, is often defined by your ability to provide. When a father's in a financial situation that they can't, or they haven't been able to, or in some situations that they won't, for whatever the circumstances are financially, that also has nothing to do with your ability to be emotionally supportive and spiritually supportive. You can give your child things that you may perhaps not be giving to the mom. You may not even be able to take care of financially for the child. But for kids, they're not determining your love based on whether or not that $200 check showed up on time or whatever it is. That's not the decision that they're making. Even though mom may feel that because there are bills that need to be paid and things that the kids may need to purchase. That is very real, but that's also but that's also between you and mom, and that is not the only way in which you are a father. So just because you can't, specifically for those dads who don't have enough right now, just because you can't doesn't mean that you don't still have the right or the need to be as involved through all the other wealthy ways in which you can be there for your child. Your wealth and the health of your relationship with your child is not based on a dollar figure, but it is very much based on your presence and your investment, as Kevin was referencing previously, in all of the areas of your children's life. Kids can feel rich and not have money. because of the kind of love and commitment that they have from both of their parents. But in this particular scenario, with a father who's outside of the household, be there for your kid, even if you can't financially be there for your kid.
But that provider piece is very important.
It is important. You have to do, yeah.
Yes, you do have to
You can
provide.
do.
And I will tell you that many dads have come to me struggling because if I'm paying child support, then how do I know that the money that I'm giving is
It's
going to the
kids,
best
right.
interest of the child?
Right.
Because in many cases, it just is taken out,
Sure.
and I have no say
You don't.
over where the money is going. So that is a real issue for a lot of men, and this is where, again, conversation comes in and clarity so that everybody understands that even the child, that yes, I am providing, because providing is important to dads, but the dad needs to also know and feel that what I'm providing is going to good use.
Right.
And that's a different conversation that sometimes isn't always had, but needs to be had when you're talking about parenting from afar, so to speak.
So understanding how the contribution's used, what it's for, and having those conversations.
How do I know it's not you using it?
Right.
You understand?
Right.
I need to know that it's going to my child. And sometimes that can be a very touchy but necessary conversation that needs to be had.
Well, let me ask you one more thing, because one of the things I've seen is that once maybe the breakup was bad, or the dad was in a position maybe where he was working a lot of hours, or things weren't good at first, and dad just gives up. So I think one of the harder things is once you've lost that connection, how do you get it back? How do you come back into the picture and say, I'm going to be the parent that I wanted to be? I wasn't able to for a little while there, but I'm going to do it now.
Yeah, so that takes a lot for the dad to be able to make that admission and say, listen, I'm at a different place. Again, that goes back to where mom is at that point. Can I trust you at this point to come back into the child's life, because we don't want to set up again for the child to be disappointed? So I'm sure mom's going to want to know that if you're trying to come back into the picture, it needs to be permanent. It needs to be consistent.
Right.
You need to have a plan. You need to understand that you can't just come in and out. And I think after all of those factors are worked out, I do think that mom and dad should sit down and create a way for it to be introduced gradually. I don't think it should just be all at once, hey, I'm back in your life again. But you create opportunities so that dad and child can be comfortable with it, and you grow from there.
And I definitely think that it's important for the acknowledgement to be part of the process, because a lot of times when whatever the partner is, whether it is the mom or the dad who has not been actively involved in the scenario, when you don't acknowledge for your child that I recognize that I have failed you in some way, I have not been present for you in some way, there's a lot of unresolved resentment that the children feel. And how dare you just come in and all of a sudden your magic dad, your magic mom, whatever you are, like I don't even want that in my life. You haven't been there. You don't even know me anymore. And you're still relating to me like I was when I was 5 years old, because that was the last time you were active. So it's important that we have an acknowledgement of what had taken place previously, so that we can create
the parent, to the child.
Absolutely.
Everything's out on board.
Absolutely. So that we can create a new ground zero, and we're building from that place. But when we don't make that acknowledgement, we are always working from underground. And it's really difficult for a child to trust you enough to let you back in. It's difficult
because
for
the child
parent.
feels it's my fault, or you didn't.
Absolutely.
There's something wrong with me. Is the
Absolutely.
reason you weren't there.
And if I'm older, I'm now angry with
Angry about
you,
it.
and I know that there was something wrong with what you did too. I might not understand it, but I know it. And the fact that you won't acknowledge it seems hypocritical in some way. You're going to come try to be a parent to me, but you haven't even acknowledged your stuff. All of that creates unnecessary tensions that a simple and honest acknowledgement. You don't have to give the child all the details about what went wrong, but simply acknowledging the fact that I wasn't there. I should have been, and I want to do a better job. And if you'll give me the chance to do that, I will earn your trust one step at a time to be part of your life again. You don't have to be perfect, but be honest with your kids, because they feel it, they know it, even when they don't say it.
And you have to give them the opportunity to express their honesty with you.
Right.
You've got to let them be angry.
Let
Absolutely.
You can't make them keep
Let
it
them
bottled
tell
up.
you what it has meant to them.
Yep,
for
what
you
it's
not
felt
to be
like.
around.
Absolutely.
For me to walk out on the field or the court and look in the stands and not see you.
Right.
They need that opportunity, and then you can build from there to be
Absolutely.
able to regain trust. But again, I go back, if you're not in it for the long haul, don't say I want to start and then
And
you
then
go
give it up
back and do
again.
the same thing again.
Right.
That's not healthy at all.
No, but it is an important thing to be involved.
Absolutely.
Your kids
Figure
need
out what
you.
that is, to
Absolutely.
be honest, and to continue to parent the child you brought into this world. For any of us.
Right, as effectively as you can. It will never be perfect.
No.
But you can do a good job working hard at it, knowing that it won't be perfect, but it is always necessary.
And just for the record, we'll say that there are a bunch of dads out there who are the primary parent
Absolutely.
and have this same
And this is
issue,
happening in the other
with it.
direction,
Just
absolutely.
Statistically, it's more common one way, but it doesn't mean that's the only thing that happens. We all have to figure out how to work together, get past whatever has happened, and focus on those wonderful children that we made.
Absolutely, they deserve it.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Robin.
And thank you for watching. I hope you will think about this, whether you are in a wonderful situation now and things might change later, whether you are the parent with custody and control or the parent on the other side. And remember that your child is the most important thing, and that we all, extended families, have to work together to raise those children to be happy, healthy human beings. Thanks for watching.